All right, everyone. Welcome to Transform Tuesdays. Who's excited to be here?
I am excited.
Hello. Happy
Yeah,
Women's Day to all ladies.
all right. Yeah, Lara giving the shout out here. Lara, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hey guys, I am Lara Carrasco. I am 26 years old and I work in GE Healthcare in logistics, international logistics department.
Incredible. Awesome. Gustavo, you want to give a brief introduction here?
Of course, yeah. Happy Women's Day, you all. Excited to be here. If you haven't met me, I have been here with AK a couple of times. I'm Gustavo, also work at Data Meaning, and excited to be talking about data, women in leadership, women in the data universe, and excited to hear your questions.
Awesome. And my name's Andrew Kim. So I'm an Alteryx ace and have been in the data space for a number of years. And I'm going to say Happy Women's Month because it's actually Women's History Month.
All right.
Yeah.
They get a whole month. And what I'm excited to be talking about today is we're actually going to change it up a little bit. We'll be talking a little bit about workflows, but we're also going to be discussing today the ways in which women are impacting the data industry and what are some of the powerful products and platforms in the data transformation space that are actually women founded, right? And then also have a large number of women helping to develop the products. So Gustavo, you have some really cool stuff that you wanted to share with us today.
Yeah,
You
I
want to go
do.
ahead and share your screen?
Of course. So this workflow that I'm gonna share with you guys, it is an Alteryx workflow. Let me know when you guys can see it.
Yes.
Cool. And as you can see, it came from the weekly challenge. So for those of you who are not familiar with this, Alteryx, like you can submit a challenge, but every week there are new challenges that you can solve. You get, um, of course, points in the community and everything, and it's extremely incentivated, not only at data meeting, but every time you're studying for a test or there's something new you want to learn. I always talk about the weekly challenges with everyone that's interested in Alteryx. Okay, so this right here, let me show you what the input looks like first. So we're talking about men and women, the employment rate, right? Uh, since 1968 up until 2016. Of course, the pandemic does change that scenario a little bit, but we do have like 50 years here for us to analyze. And what I thought was really interesting about this challenge is they wanted us, we're not only using data preparation here. As you can see, we do have the charting tool, and we're using this tool to create this visual. So, giving you guys some spoilers, this is what we're trying to accomplish with this specific workflow. So, we're getting the percentage of women full time and percentage of men full time. And I wanted to, before I say anything else about the workflow, I wanted to give a space for Lara and AK Andrew to talk a little bit. Like, what do you think of this visual, this data? Do you think that's helpful?
Yeah, so I can kick it off here. Um, when we're looking at this workflow, I definitely think it's helpful, especially in terms of tracking it. Obviously, we're missing an entire axis here, right? Where we may have some questions about the data. Um, I think one of the questions that I always draw in mind is this is insights that's meant to draw your attention And what I like is actionable insights. So I'd be looking here, is there anything in the data to help make this actionable?
You mean the input?
Yeah, within the data set itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lara?
Um, well, I think it's very clear to me, as I think Gustavo said before, we're missing the dates, but I don't think it matters a lot. It's 50 years long, but it's pretty clear that we can see the decreasing of men working full time, and
Hmm,
stabilization in women. Um, yeah, it's good. I liked it.
awesome.
Yeah. The one thing that I would comment on is the title, right? Like what you said about the dates, we could very easily see it here, right?
Yeah, the little dots.
Yeah, we could do that. Or if let's say we wanted to type here for the past 50 years,
Yeah, yeah,
that's
true.
something that would give the user a perspective, because the only reason we know this is the 50 years
Yeah,
is
because we
because,
know.
yeah, we have access to the data set, but
Yeah,
the final user might not have access to this data.
exactly.
But yeah,
Yeah.
those are some cool comments.
Yeah, one of the things that I find interesting when we're talking about transforming this data, right, which is important when we're working within a transformation tool, is one, providing the context in terms of time to transition to a visualization, which here is in the platform itself, Alteryx, right? The other thing that I also look at is when we're looking at this, how do we define full time, right? So this
Hmm.
may be something
Mm.
like, if you were working in this, right, that you may want to provide some documentation of what constitutes full time. So especially when we're dealing with labor markets, which is important because, like, my wife just had a baby, right? So if she were in those numbers, my question is, was she seeking employment to begin with, right? So
Yeah.
is this, in this context, those who are seeking employment are men currently as a gender seeking more employment than women are? And then the question is, why? And then um, are there changes that we want to make, right? So I'll give you an example of one stigma that I felt um, is being addressed in some companies, or sorry, countries, and isn't in others. And this was actually one of my favorite women in data is Eva Murray. Do you know who Eva Murray is, Laura?
No.
Okay, so she's actually a former Tableau Zen master, and she's over at Snowflake now. She's really incredible because she deals with large data sets. She does a Run with Data blog, and then she also posts for the New Yorker sometimes.
Nice.
Um, and she does triathlons. So she's posting about her runs and different things. But one of the ones that she actually did was talking about, with Snowflake data, she discussed um, what the um, leave is, the parental leave per country.
Mm-hmm.
And when we discuss that, in a lot of countries, including the US, that's actually not the same for men and women. So you
Yeah.
have maternity leave, right, which is typically anywhere from like 6 weeks up to 12 weeks. And then for men, as an example, like sometimes it's zero, and then
Yeah.
other times they'll match.
It differs
So
from company too, right? There are companies that
exactly.
gives men way more paternity leave than others. There are companies that gives up to 2 months of paternity leave. It's very cool. It's like a benefit for the employee.
Wow, that's really incredible. And I think when we kind of talk about that, right, if we're talking about getting more women involved in data. So something when I look at these two, right, is how do we make both genders more alike in terms of maybe some of their behaviors, right? So an
Mm-hmm.
example would be vacations in general, right? So vacations in general, as parents, we may both go in and do like a summer break or a spring break, right? So then
Yeah.
if we were looking at outliers in terms of other vacations or time off periods that we take, one of the ones that obviously sticks out is parental leave, right? And then if there are other ones, I think it would be helpful to identify those because then we may be able to see these kind of tighten even further.
Hmm.
Yeah, true.
And
There's a lot of potential in that graphic to make it very informative.
Yeah.
yeah, and one other aspect of parental leave, right? We like one thing that the company that I used to work for, Lara and I actually worked together in the same company. They had paternity leave for lesbian couples, right? So when two women are married, they're having a kid. It's not only the mother that generates the kid, right? That would have maternity leave. The
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
other mom would have what we call paternity leave, but it would also be uh, 2+ months. So there's like whenever we talk about this kind of topic, there's also the social side
Hmm.
because that's a recent thing. Like it hasn't always been like that,
Hmm.
and to some people, it might even be absurd, right, to have a woman on paternity leave, but that's the world we live in today, and we had to adapt.
Totally
Exactly.
true.
Yeah.
And I think when we're kind of discussing some of those aspects, right, we're just going to continue to drive forward and see different changes um, as we look at these. And I'm actually going to, I'll post it here in the chat and I'll share my screen real quick in regards to what I was talking about with Eva Murray, because it's actually a great post. Let me share my screen here. And when we look at this, right, you can literally see her newsletter. This was her LinkedIn post. And what she does is she's grabbing leave across Snowflake in a data source that's publicly available. So I think that's the first part of it, right? When we talk about shaping careers, it's if we have stories that are interesting to everybody, then it's going to provide a cross section for all of us to start a conversation, right?
Mhm.
And that's the first part of the journey. And when we look at this, right, you can literally see the US is the only country without statutory mandatory leave. And
Wow.
that's
Wow.
incredible. So looking at like Bulgaria, they're over a year, right? Or right at a year. And then you have other countries,
Wow.
and we're literally here with nothing. Um, and let's see, do we see? I don't see Brazil in here. So
Yeah.
that's actually
But
interesting and may not be included in the data set, right?
yeah, we do have it though. Uh,
Yeah, we do.
and
It's
how
I
does it
think
work,
it's
Lara?
6 months. It may
6 months.
be, yeah,
Nice.
6 up to 7 months.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you can. I know that you can. You have maternity leave, and you can put your PTO all together. And in Brazil, PTO is 1 month every year. So I think essentially, I think it's five. And if you put together PTO, it adds up to 6 months. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it depends on your pregnancy too. If it's a risk pregnancy, maybe you have more.
more time.
More time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think when we look at this, right, that's an easy way of kind of stabilizing that because it's the outlier, right? It's the largest gap of time that someone may take off in terms of a life event, right?
Mm.
And I think when we look beyond that, um, there are other aspects like we were talking about for data. So, Lara, part of what we haven't discussed yet is what brought you into the data industry.
Yeah, my journey in this data industry began until recent times. I began in 2000, in the end of 2019, along with Gustavo that worked with me in PwC. We worked in different departments, but we all could apply to a program that it would be like a digital upskilling to the company, and we were so excited about it, and it seemed very new, and we could have a course that would teach us many different tools and many new technologies, and we just we applied, and we got in that program together, and that's where I started, and I really felt like I belonged in this world, and yeah, and since then I never stopped working with data anymore. So technology really got into my life in all the work I did after that. So even dashboards, transformation tools, uh, they were all part of my life after that. Even Alteryx, I we all fell in love with Alteryx. It's awesome, and well, I'm really glad that I could be a part of it, and I'm really glad that I met this world.
And I think there's a lot of growth, especially in this space for everyone, right? So when we talk about that, there's things like WIDS, which is Women in Data Science, right? There's user groups, etc., that are specific to women, industries, right? Or even geolocations. So it provides us a nice cross section in terms of being able to collaborate or network. And what's exciting about right now, especially, is you don't even necessarily have to be concerned about geographical boundaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even if there is maybe uh, not as many uh, women in either your specific industry, right, or any of those other ones that I touched on, there's actually virtual user groups or sessions like this,
Yeah,
right, that are available to essentially learn and cultivate or even meet and network with those individuals
yeah,
or other women.
Yeah, one thing that I will say I've noticed in Brazil for the like in the last couple of years. I don't know if you've heard, Lara, of that group called Girls Who Code.
Hmm.
Yeah,
no,
this group, Girls Who Code, right? So like coding. I have a friend of mine, and she won that contest.
nice.
And it's funny because it started out as a small thing, and then like we started having, by we I mean like the program started having people from all over the country, and
Yeah,
girls who know Python or Studio and that work with data on a daily basis. They started joining, and it became a huge contest. So uh, it's cool because it showed that as much as people think that coding data it's a more masculine world, it really isn't. And for those of you who still believe, we're trying to change it, right? So those contests are proof that people all over the place are trying to introduce new people and have a more diverse environment. Have you
yeah.
heard of that contest, AK?
Yeah, I have heard of that one, and a couple others that are similar, right? And I think when we look at this, there are organizations or even teams. Lara, you had mentioned like right before we went live that you were actually in a department that was primarily women, correct?
Yeah. My department only had one director. Oh, he's my daughter.
Hey,
My
Mika.
Future women in data, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. I'm gonna incentive her. Uh, yeah, so in my department there was only one director that was a man. So all the other we had like four managers, women. All the staff was women. So yeah, women are definitely empowering in the companies right now, and including now that we're seeing a kid children, there are games for coding, so it's incentiving,
Incentivized.
yeah, with games that learn how to code. So even if you're a kid, you can learn that and be prepared for the market later.
Yeah. And I think when we kind of talk about that, right, if we're looking for people who can offer inspiration, right? So some of the examples would literally be um, we've got Shamila, who is actually the founder and CEO of Clear Story. So that was one of the acquisitions for um, Alteryx, and then there's actually another one. I'm trying to pull her name up right now in relation to Auto Insights, which is a recent acquisition for Alteryx as well, and that one is was women owned, and then they're again incorporating into the diversity of the product specifically for Alteryx, and there's tons of other examples out there of female CEOs who have really taken their company to the next level.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
especially in sorry, especially in cosmetics. There are a
Mhm.
lot of companies that I buy from that were founded, designed by women, in the market of vegan products, makeup, vegan makeup, vegan hair products. They're all owned, designed by women.
Yes.
yeah, and there are. It's cool that you mentioned that because there are a few investment funds. I don't really know a lot of investment funds in the US, but I know in Brazil there are many that, similar to ESG, they only invest in companies that are founded that they have female CEOs. So if you want to invest in one specific company that was founded or they have a female CEO, you can. But if you want to invest in many of them at the same time, you can choose one of those funds. So
Cool.
Awesome.
it is cool.
Yeah, and I think when we kind of talk about this, right, it we went all the way from a basic analytics job, right, all the way up to CEO
Yeah.
with kind of managing some of those different aspects. So I think what's exciting when we have this conversation, right, is the link that I literally just put in the chat from Natalie Wynn, who's the CEO of HyperAnna. That's the Auto Insights that I was talking about. Literally with that company, she's talking about how do you balance the grind, right? So when we look at this, there are, excuse me, components of that that I think apply to everyone. And then obviously there's some gender aspects that we can discuss that are kind of tied to that. And it's almost interesting to kind of see how that changes and will adjust over time. And I think us being on the go um, and talking about multitaskers, right? So um, it it is scientifically proven that
Yes.
women are better multitaskers than men are, right?
Yeah.
So
There
when
is
we
no
look at,
way to be a mom and not be multitask and work at the same time.
oh yeah, and I think when we look at that, right, it's like, hey, if it's positions or even from a departmental perspective, if there's components that we need to do from a multitasking perspective, right, we should see um, more of those positions, etc., kind of even out in terms of who we're looking for to kind of take those positions, right? And then like even books, right, recommendations, etc., all that's here. And I think these are good for everybody. Literally, at the end of the day yesterday, I did some yoga, right? So stretching and releasing that tension. And we have a 6-month-old, so doing the holding and the rocking, right? Your shoulders get a little worn out.
Yeah.
So I look forward to seeing us be excited about making it a more gender neutral environment, especially when we're exposed to a work from home environment, right?
Yeah. And
For
one thing about you said gender neutral and data together is on like big organizations we're capable of measuring that, right? So we can measure age, we can measure gender, we can measure all kinds of data. Like if the company is a data driven company, and we can say, okay, so there are 10 departments and there's one department that does not have any women. Why is that? So is it maybe because the director in that department, he doesn't like women? Is it because he doesn't treat women the way they're supposed to? So it helps leadership make better decisions, right? So
Yeah.
that's the whole purpose of data. So
Well, and I think something that's interesting is we always assume that it's vindictive, right? Like that's our first leap is like, oh man,
yeah,
that's what it
mhm.
is. Just like with salaries, right? That's like you always see the graphs with the salary gap. And something that I've learned is part of it is around just mentoring, right? And then making sure everyone is comfortable with simple things like the ask, right? So, literally, as an example, something that I ask at the beginning of all the enablement sessions is who here would like a promotion, right? Just to
yeah,
see, hey, if you're going to learn these cool new things, right? How are you going to apply that? It should be getting excited about all the things that you can automate and teaching others, and that typically results in a promotion. And hopefully that comes with a raise too, and being comfortable in understanding what is your value worth, right? Where are those resources? Those are, I think, things that come in general from mentorship, right? And either you can find a strong woman for that, or are there people just in general that exist, right, that can provide that information?
yeah.
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 And also how it's being exposed in the media, right? Like not only in real life, but like if you go on Netflix, there are plenty of shows that I think there's even a category, TV shows with powerful women,
Mhm.
and one of like my favorite ones is Suits, and like Jessica Pearson, come on, she's the most powerful woman in television ever. So it's insane how how quickly it's going, right? There's Girl Boss. I think it got canceled, but it is a good show that I've watched like in one day, like
I didn't watch Girl
the
Boss.
entire
Oh
season.
no, wait. It's about that girl that owns a clothing store.
Yes.
Oh, it's
She
so
sells
cool.
clothes online. Yeah. I
It's
was so
so
sad
cool.
when it got canceled,
Yeah.
but it's cool to see even Inventing Anna, the
Mm.
newest one. It's not the best scenario, but like she was a very powerful character, and I love seeing like Jessica Pearson. I mean, she there's no beating Jessica Pearson. Have you guys seen Suits at all?
Oh yes.
It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
so good.
Not
Uh,
everything.
Donna, Rachel, they're all very powerful, and they are like the main characters, right?
Well, what I appreciate is we always assume that it's the title that we have to be gunning for, right?
Mhm.
And I honestly, some of the most powerful women that I have met are actually admins, as
Mhm.
crazy as that sounds, because some days I feel like I can barely manage my own calendar, right? I couldn't imagine having to manage someone else's and to be the gatekeeper and pull all those things together, right? So when we look at that, I mean, I think that's part of the reason why we have administrative assistant day, right? All of those things. When you look at top CEOs, right? Typically, where do you learn all those skills? Even if you were taking notes in the meeting, you have exposure probably that no one else has, right?
Mhm.
And if you were involved in that, I think that's where coming from the ask perspective, right? That's basically like having an internship for a C-suite level position. So other than maybe some of the fundamental training, right, from a um, typical degree perspective, you have all the day-to-day stuff, right? Which would be just
Hmm.
like an apprentice. And that actually reminds me of the show The Apprentice, right? Or the other one that I love. Now I'm going to forget. I'm totally going to forget the name of it. And I can picture his face and everything. It's the prophet. So it has the bald guy on there, and literally he goes into different companies, right? And the companies are typically struggling a little bit. And what's different there is he's looking at product, people, and process, right? So those three things are really the key drivers. So when I look at those, right, women in data, what are the components that we really have to succeed? Right? So people, Gustavo, you're talking about diversification on a team as
Yeah.
one example, right? Process would be the component that I had mentioned in regards to um, maybe the uh, portion around mentorship, right? Or maybe inclusiveness in regards to training for exposure, like you were talking about with the accelerator program, which is
Yeah.
huge, right?
Yeah.
And that just grants exposure. And then the final portion is product. So, Lara, are there any products that you see or platforms that you like that are maybe women owned or women centric in terms of their views?
I don't know if there there's a platform that is women centered, but I know that a platform that is generally known, and it's usually the first platform that we had contact with, is Power BI. I
Nice.
think dashboarding is something that you definitely can start with, and it's not easy. It's just intuitive, and
Mm.
encourages people to start digging further on how to build them and what goes behind them. So we see something visual, and behind that we can see much more complicated data, and we are encouraged to find out how to do it and how to build that. For
Yeah,
me, I think it's Power BI.
that's actually really interesting. I keep telling my wife, "Hey, you need an Alteryx license," because I know there's Alteryx in her company, but I had never thought about asking her, "Hey, what about Power BI?" Because she's actually a heavy Excel user, so she
Yeah.
actually does coding, but it's medical coding. And
Yeah.
ironically for her, she was telling me the other day, she's like, "Oh wow, I'm having my first interview for a male coder." And she's like, "It's so weird." And I was like, "How is that weird?" I'm like, "How many men do you work with?" And she's like, "None. There's no men on my team."
Yeah.
And I think when we got to talk about this, right, there is some natural gravitation that exists. And I don't think it necessarily has to be gender neutral, right, in terms of what it naturally pans out to be. But I do think that it's interesting just to kind of be aware of it, right?
Mm,
And then to understand, hey, are we granting the same opportunities, or is there glass ceilings like Gustavo was mentioning? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I one topic that we didn't talk about is, like, we kind of talked about Netflix and stuff. There's this one show with, I forgot what her name is. Like, the story is like she owns like a hair product company. She's a black woman in the US, and uh it was during the time that, like, racial prejudice was huge, right?
mhm,
So, like, she was the owner of the company. She started, like, she developed, like, she created her own hair products, and she started becoming super successful.
mhm,
And, like, when we already see that gender gap, right,
yeah,
between men and women. But if we dig a little deeper and we put race in the equation, it's already, like, it's even larger, right? So black women, at least in Brazil, they're less likely to get a job, to get a full-time job, than a white woman. So
mhm,
there's a gap between men and women, and then white women and black women. So that kind of data, like that kind of conclusion, is what leads companies. And we have a very big company here called Magazine Luiza, which
mhm,
is like Amazon, like they sell things online.
mhm.
Uh, and they did a, like, recruitment process of only black people. So
Yeah.
Okay.
uh, they hired, like, all at once. I think they hired like 200 black people. So that would not be possible if we didn't have the data, right? Like, to know about both gender and race. So.
Yeah, I think something that's interesting that we typically see whenever we focus on any particular breakdown in terms of demographics, regardless of what it is, right? I think we are forgetting also at a high level, what is the percentage of population that that represents? So gender is pretty easy because it's almost 50-50, right? So that one should be pretty transparent. It should be pretty even. When we talk about um, different races, etc., right? Um, Sexual orientations, I mean, you can run the gamut, right? In terms of looking at this, that's the thing that I love about demographic data. What does that represent in terms of the population? So when we look at census data, right, which is in part what we're discussing as being maybe the backbone of some of this analysis, if we were trying to do 50-50 as a representation maybe of our company, and then yet we're in an area that, let's say, for instance, a city where it's 75% men or 75% women, right? We're actually not representing the population in which
Mhm.
we live accurately. And that's where I look at some of that, right? Where if you go back to um, both the women's rights movement and then um, even just the civil rights movement, right? Both of those particular areas were in order to gain neutrality, right, in those aspects relating to rights, and then affirmative action came from that. And when we look at affirmative action, the idea is it should be providing those opportunities. The question is at what level? And I think some of it can be offset, right? So there may be an overcorrection that we do, and then we level set back to a natural state. But
Mhm.
I think the question that we need to ask ourselves is what we're seeing, especially if we're asking to be provided these reports, right? You're in an HR department, etc. What are you doing for your data to make sure it's a true representation, maybe of the population outside of the organization as well as inside? And
Yeah.
that's a great movie or show, Gustavo.
Oh,
Yeah, and it's perfect that you say that, because there are some countries in Africa that um, like they have like over 80% of like black people, right? So if we come to the conclusion that in a company in that specific country has like 40% or 50%, that would be good in Brazil, but it would not be good in that country, right?
Exactly.
Uh, so it would be over half, uh, like of a gap. So
Hmm.
it, we would always like we always need to compare with demographics of that, either that department, right? So if we're doing a large scale, like if we're let's talk about Alteryx developers or Tableau Power BI developers, or of a specific region. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I love that you. I never thought about that, so
Yeah,
it's great that you said that.
Well, and it
I
could even
see.
be related to the industry, right? So you have like the scandal that happened with Lululemon, right? Where there was all those issues related to the product and the CEO that was on at the head of the company, right?
Mhm.
And when we look at that, part of what I look at is, hey, if it's primarily a, a women-oriented product, right, or platform, okay, well then who's better to sell to women than other women, right? Uh, so when we kind of look at that, that's where I view and say, okay, is there some mixture that we should be kind of seeing there so we can emulate maybe either our product or service or our target demographic, right? Because they're going to be most in tune naturally with what we're trying to achieve.
The public target.
Exactly. So, Lara, are there any companies that you admire, like that you use in your personal day-to-day life,
Yeah.
that you feel kind of do that? And you're like, yeah, of course I love it because,
Yeah, in this pandemic time, I started I started really appreciating vegan products, and then I dug into that world, and I see that it's only made by women. The hair products, body products, makeup, so everything is made by women, and they actually build a huge company. They're uh, in Brazil. They're really big, and well, I really enjoyed it, and I'm really proud of what women are accomplishing now with that. I really support it. I wish I could be, you know, I wish I could have those ideas. They're just amazing. They make like makeups now that don't have any plastic wrapping. I mean, nothing. It's
what?
just yeah, it's like a lipstick that it's a little ball of makeup, and then you just press it on, and you can put it on your mouth, in your cheeks, everything. It's
Whoa,
it's really cool, and also with eyeshadow, everything. It's so cool. I really dug that idea, and it's made by women.
man, that's crazy. I think that's interesting, right? Because even if you think about that in terms of data transformation, how it's changing things, like I look at Auto Insights and, hey, you don't need to tell me some of the things, right? I'm going to try and make it intuitive. The way in which that's packaged totally changes things. And I hate plastic. My wife actually gets angry sometimes because I literally have a whole separate bin that's
Yeah,
outside, and I'll go
it's
dig in the
correct.
trash and readjust the plastic in there. And Gustavo knows I've got crazy
Yeah.
hobbies with like worms. I think I finally got him on board with that.
Oh yeah, the worms idea.
Actually, AK, I had known about composting and worms even before I joined data meeting. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, but it only started working now, like for the past 3 months, because I started living with my girlfriend, and like now we have more space. But I'll give you credit for the fun guy, like that you
Okay.
told me about the books, but composting is something that's been present for a while now.
Yeah.
But and
I
also Lara taught me something about the wax wrapping.
oh yeah.
Uh,
Ah,
yeah, have you seen those, AK?
It's an echo wrap.
okay.
It's a piece of rag. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, it's like
Uh,
a piece of cloth, right?
yeah.
Oh, with like the beeswax to
Yeah,
wrap.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. To wrap things to replace that plastic film that you use in kitchens, and it's it's so cool. I use it all the time. Everything in my kitchen, in my fridge. And I feel like all these eco initiatives are mostly started by women
That's
when I
true.
see it.
It's definitely true. And it's interesting because I, even the products, right? Especially now that my wife's um, doing breastfeeding, etc. I see all the products and the innovation, like um, bottle warmers, where like literally you just screw the bottle on and you flip it over, and then from a product perspective, like storing breast milk, right? So literally, she has it's almost like a Yeti, right? So there's a canister. I should have like too bad she's not sitting here. I'd go and start grabbing stuff. But it's like a Yeti, and literally you screw in the top, you can put ice in it, and then it just keeps the breast milk cold.
Wow.
And I look at those, and I mean, that was
it could
eighty
not.
dollars.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
could
and
not
I'm
have
like,
been invented by a guy.
yeah. Well, it doesn't need to be, right? And that's kind of the point. I don't even
Yeah.
think it has to
Yeah,
be about genders or any of those components. It's more like Freedom Mom, all the stuff that they have. I mean, I love the baby nose sucker. Um, that's something Gustavo's like, I don't even, I'm not sure I want
Yeah.
to know what
I have
that
It's
no
is.
idea
something
what that is.
nasty that they put in the baby's nose to
Yeah.
take off the goo. Well,
Okay. Yeah.
And I mean, there's so many of these things, right? I look at what my mom has done and what other moms have done, right? And you
yeah.
talk about like getting in there with dirty stuff, right? This isn't even dirty data.
Yeah.
If mothers are willing to do this stuff, right? Think of how clean they can make data. And Lara,
Yeah. True.
we were talking about being meticulous, right? So,
Yeah.
uh, what are some of the things like when we're talking about data that you like to be meticulous about?
Um, when you get that table that all the data are like in different columns, like this column is one type of data, and then in the middle of it, it starts another type, and you have to what you receive that from a client, and then you have to fix it. I just hate when that comes up because yeah, this kind of stuff. Uh, we're talking about women like clean data. Well, I do.
Yeah. And one thing that came to my mind, AK, when you were mentioning the bottle, the other day, I think it was on LinkedIn. Um, like when like we're I was reading about pregnancy tests, right,
Mhm.
for blind women. So it's funny that I've never thought of this before, but before this innovation that I'm gonna talk about, blind women, well, like when they were taking pregnancy tests, they couldn't see the result. They would have
Oh,
to go
true.
to someone and have that person say, okay, one line or two lines, right?
Mhm.
So it totally takes away their freedom, their like
Yeah,
independency in a way that
privacy.
it could even be humiliating, right? Like you
Yeah.
don't want people to know. Sometimes it's an information that you want to keep to yourself. So this company that was founded by a woman, they created a type of pregnancy test for blind women. So instead of seeing the one line and the two lines, it was a digital uh, um, visor, right? That
Makes a
you'd be
sound.
able to with sound, and you could put your hand and you would feel what the result is.
Nice.
So I'll also send the link in the chat. But that was mind blowing to me because I would have never been able to put myself on those women's shoes,
Yeah.
and I didn't even know there was a problem until I read it, and
Yeah.
it's been a problem since the beginning of like humanity, right? Uh, so so yeah, those
Yeah.
are, it's just one cool example
It's
of how we
it's
can innovate.
it's women problems that creates those innovative solutions. I mean, it had to be thought by women. It had to be a situation that a woman went through to to invent that.
Well, and there's plenty, I think, examples like how you hear, oh, behind every great man, there's a great woman, right? So I look at like Bill Gates, you have Melinda Gates, right? I admire everything that she's doing in terms of helping with education, etc. And then another one that I'm thinking of is Anne, I'm going to butcher her last name, Wojcinski. So she's the founder of 23andMe. So the DNA testing, right, that you can do. She's married to Sergey Brin, who's one of the founders of Google, right?
Wow.
So it's impressive that you have these women who literally it's not, oh, I need to become subservient to my husband who's amazing, right? They're going off and doing their own thing too. So
They're
like,
being amazing
yeah,
themselves.
exactly. So, and in her case, right, she graduated from Yale. So there's no shortage, I think, from in that perspective, from having smart women around. It's more just how can we essentially cultivate and continue to grow these things. And I think it goes back to what you had mentioned, Lara, which is essentially like for your daughter, right? What are some of the things for STEM, et cetera, that she can be involved in, right? And then making sure that there's just no gender bias in relation to that. And then making sure that we're leaving doors open for them to really get started in these spaces, right?
Yeah. Yeah, parenting nowadays it is different, right? You have to teach them differently. I mean, when she comes to me and say, "Hey, I want this pink because I cannot wear this blue shirt," and I say, "Why not? It's a color and it's pretty. You can use whatever you want." Because they come with that idea, and you have to open their minds.
Exactly. And what's interesting is as children, right? Um, initially, they're not going to register any of those ideas, right? So they just say, "Hey, this is my friend," not, "Oh, it's a boy," right? They shouldn't be playing with
Mm-hmm.
dolls or whatever with me.
Yeah.
Um, I actually watched a special on how it's made, right? And they talked about the invention of like Mattel and I'm going to forget what the other um, big company is in terms of toys.
Mm.
David's too little for this right now, but they were talking about Barbies and GI Joes and kind
Mm.
of the history behind those, and it was interesting to hear that. So even Barbie was actually a woman who was running behind the scenes her husband's furniture company. And
Wow.
then what they figured out is like, oh my gosh, we have so much waste here, all these scraps, we need to do something with it. Let's make dolls. And then um, rather than like to date all the dolls, you would pretty much buy a doll like a Raggedy Ann doll, and that's it. It has one wardrobe, it's kind of sewn onto it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what they said is, oh my gosh, women love to buy clothes. How about we have
Let's
a
make
doll?
doll
Yeah,
clothes.
doll clothes. And literally every season, this doll needs new clothes, right? And then they talked about, oh, well, not only do they need new clothes, they're going to have different jobs, right? And so that's part of what helped break down some of those barriers and get women excited about space, about accounting. I mean, Rosie the Riveter, all those things that you see that are so interesting and cool. So,
Yeah, revolutionary.
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. So it looks like we're at time here. So I want to say thank you, Lara, for joining us today. I really enjoyed you spending some time with us. And Gustavo, thank you as always. And also for bringing Lara here today. And then Lara, actually, if you can help us out, because we would like to see more women here, right?
Yeah.
I just posted in the chat if you want to share the link with friends, etc., in regards to signing up for sessions to speak, because we would love to see different points of view, right? And different data sets and workflows. And I think part of what you saw here today will kind of transform more into 3 charts at 3 p.m. as well tomorrow.
Absolutely. Oh, I'll share. I'll definitely share. Thank you, guys, for this opportunity of speaking to you today. I really enjoyed it, and I hope more women can show up in this Tuesday sessions.
And Thursdays, right? We're going to have some Thursday sessions
Oh,
as well.
true.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Thank you for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow on 3 charts at 3 p.m.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Happy
Bye
Tuesday.
bye.